I still remember the sound of laughter that wasn't mine echoing through my house that night. The house I'd worked a decade to pay for. The house that was supposed to be my safe place, my little sanctuary from the chaos of the world. When I opened my front door and stepped into the entryway, I thought for one split second that I'd walked into the wrong home, that somehow I had miscalculated and put my key into someone else's lock. Shoes were scattered across the mat, not mine. Little backpacks with cartoon characters I didn't recognize were tossed on the floor. And then came the voices. Familiar, yes, but so wildly out of place that my brain almost refused to process them. My sister Holly, her husband Nicholas, and the squealing chatter of their 2 kids. I froze, hands still clutching the doorknob, pulse hammering in my ears. You know that gut-deep feeling when something is just wrong? That's what tore through me. My sanctuary wasn't my sanctuary anymore. It had been invaded. I walked into my living room, and there they were, as casual as if this were some family reunion I'd agreed to host. Suitcases cracked open, clothes spilling everywhere. Nicholas plopped onto my couch like it belonged to him. Holly rifled through one of her bags while her kids ran around like they owned the place. And all I could manage to say was, "Holly, what are you doing here?" And her answer, with that same airy voice she always used when she was brushing off something serious, "Oh, hi, PB. Surprise! We're back." Back. In my house. Now, I need you to really understand what made my blood boil in that moment. This wasn't just a sibling showing up for a quick overnight stay. No, Holly and Nicholas had moved in. Boxes, bags, kids, all of it. Like they had signed a lease behind my back, and they did it without so much as a text, a call, a heads up. Nothing. When I pressed her, Holly laughed. "We just needed a place to crash for a bit while we figure things out. It'll only be for a few months." A few months? My jaw practically hit the floor. I was in shock, but more than that, I felt betrayed. This wasn't how family was supposed to treat each other. But before I go deeper into that, let me back up and tell you how we got here, because this didn't come out of nowhere. I'm Phoebe, 31 years old. I own a modest 3-bedroom house. Nothing fancy, no white picket fence dream out of a magazine, just a small, comfortable place that I bled for. I've been grinding away for 10 years, double shifts, late nights, sacrificing vacations and dinners out so that every single mortgage payment got made on time. My friends sometimes tease me for being boring because I don't live downtown in one of those shiny high-rise apartments. But you know what? At the end of the day, this house is mine. No landlord, no roommates, no one to boss me around. Just me, my space, my peace. And peace, that's something my sister has never understood. Holly is 7 years older than me. We were inseparable when we were kids, but things started changing after she got married. She and Nicholas, her high school sweetheart, always had this free-spirited energy, like they were characters in some bohemian travel documentary. At first, I admired it, but then admiration turned into frustration. You see, while I was working overtime shifts, grinding through the years, they were off talking about quitting their jobs, chasing dreams, living authentically. I can still hear her voice at family dinners, glass of wine in hand. "Life's too short to be stuck in a cubicle, PB. You should travel more, see the world." And Nicholas chiming in with that smug smile of his. "It's about experiences, not paychecks. You can't take money to the grave." And I'd sit there, biting my tongue, thinking, "Yeah, but experiences don't pay property taxes, Nicholas." I warned them. I did. They had kids, 2 little ones depending on them, and yet they burned money like it was endless. New gadgets, spontaneous trips, eating out constantly. I used to quietly envy them, wishing I could splurge like that, but deep down, I knew the truth. They were playing with fire. And then, a few months ago, they lit the match that blew everything up. They sold their house. Their house! During the market boom, they cashed out. And instead of reinvesting, instead of thinking about stability, they announced they were going to use the profit to fund a year of travel. "We're doing it, PB," Holly squealed over the phone. "We sold the house." I nearly dropped my coffee. "What? Holly, are you serious? What about the kids' school, your jobs?" She brushed it all off. "Oh, we'll homeschool them on the road. It'll be an adventure, an education in itself. And we can always find work later." Spoiler alert, it wasn't fine. At first, their Instagram was full of glossy photos, beach resorts, wine glasses clinking, "living the dream," caption after caption. And maybe part of me felt a pang of jealousy. But then the posts slowed. The pictures got grainy, camping in random fields. And then silence. I should have known that silence meant disaster. Because fast forward a couple of weeks later, I come home exhausted from a brutal day at work, dreaming of nothing more than wine and reality TV, and instead I walk into my living room to find my sister and her family setting up camp like squatters. And the kicker? They weren't even embarrassed. Nicholas leaned back on my couch, arms spread like he owned the place. "Yeah, we decided to cut the trip short," he said casually. "Turns out full-time travel with kids is harder than we thought." Holly chimed in like she was announcing something exciting. "And Mom gave you your spare key, the one you left for emergencies. I knew you wouldn't mind us crashing here for a bit." A bit. A few months. Just like that, my boundaries, my sacrifices, my years of independence, gone. And when I told them no, when I told them this was my home, that they couldn't just invade it without asking, Nicholas had the audacity to loom over me and say, "Come on, PB, don't make this difficult. We don't have anywhere else to go." That moment, I can't even describe it. It wasn't just anger, it was humiliation. The way he said it, like I was some villain for daring to defend my own house, like I was selfish. And Holly standing there nodding as if I was the one being unreasonable? Let me ask you, what would you have done in my shoes? Because I stood there, fists clenched, heart pounding, torn between throwing them out physically or just breaking down and crying. But I'll be honest, fear crept in too, because if I called the cops, their kids would be dragged into it. Did I really want to traumatize my niece and nephew just to prove a point? I felt cornered, powerless in my own home. So I retreated. I locked myself in my bedroom like a stranger in the very place I'd worked so hard to call mine. And that's when the tears came, hot and bitter. But here's the thing. Life has a strange way of throwing you lifelines when you least expect it. Because in that exact moment, when I was spiraling, my phone buzzed. A text from Alex. Alex was an old college friend, the prankster, the schemer, the guy who could turn a disaster into a comedy sketch. We hadn't talked much recently, but there he was on my screen. "Hey, Phoebes, in your area for work. Drinks tonight?" And that's when the spark lit in my brain. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of this mess. I don't know if you've ever felt it before, but when you're drowning in anger and helplessness and suddenly you see even the tiniest glimmer of a lifeline, it feels like oxygen rushing into your lungs after being held underwater. That's exactly what Alex's text felt like. Here I was, locked in my own bedroom while my freeloading sister and her smug husband set up camp in my living room, and suddenly my phone buzzed with, "Hey, Phoebes, in your area for work. Drinks tonight?" And I stared at it for a long second, wiping my face, my brain racing. Drinks? No, I didn't need drinks. I needed an escape hatch. And Alex? Alex was always the guy who could think of one. I fired back, "Actually, can you come over? I have a situation and could use your help. Bring your acting skills." That last part was a joke, or at least I thought it was at the time, but when Alex showed up an hour later and I opened the door to find him dressed as a police officer, full uniform, badge, even a pair of cuffs dangling from his belt, I nearly collapsed. "Oh my God, Alex," I whispered, eyes wide, "you're wearing the perfect costume."
He raised an eyebrow, looking down at himself like he'd forgotten what he was wearing. "What happened, Phoebes? You in trouble with the law already?" I pulled him outside and shut the door behind me, hissing, "I need your help getting rid of my relatives. They've completely taken over my house." And then I spilled everything in a rushed whisper. The surprise invasion, the entitlement, the way Nicholas tried to intimidate me, the kids' backpacks littering my entryway like a flag planted in conquered territory. And by the end of it, Alex was shaking his head, smirking. Well, damn. And here I thought I was just gonna grab a beer with an old friend. You're telling me your sister and her wannabe hippie husband actually moved into your house without asking?
Yes, I snapped, and they're acting like I should be grateful. Alex, I can't live like this. I need them gone. Tonight. He looked at me for a long moment, and then a slow grin spread across his face. Well, lucky for you, Officer Johnson is on duty. He adjusted the badge on his chest dramatically. I blinked. Wait, you're serious? As a heart attack, he said. Let me handle this. Just play along. My stomach flipped. Was I really about to pull off some elaborate bluff to trick my own sister into leaving? What if it backfired? What if Nicholas called the real police and this whole thing blew up in my face? But then I thought about the alternative. Lying awake every night in my locked bedroom while they trashed my house, ate my food, drained my utilities, and laughed at me for being too soft to stop them. No. Enough was enough. I nodded, swallowing hard. Okay, let's do this. I cracked the front door and called out, trying to sound casual. Holly, Nicholas, can you come here a sec? There's a police officer who needs to speak with us. There was a pause, then the shuffle of footsteps. Holly came into the hallway first, still smiling like she was at some family gathering. But the moment her eyes landed on Alex, tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed head to toe like an authoritative cop, the smile faltered. Nicholas appeared behind her, his smirk flickering into confusion. "Good evening," Alex said, voice calm but commanding. "I'm Officer Johnson. We received reports of a possible break-in at this address. Can you tell me what's going on here?" The silence that followed was delicious. Nicholas glanced at me, then back at Alex, his chest puffing up like a rooster. "There's no break-in here, officer. We're family. Everything's fine." "Officer," I cut in quickly, my voice trembling with both nerves and satisfaction. "These people entered my home unlawfully. I never gave them permission to be here." Alex nodded gravely, turning his gaze back to them. "Is that true? How did you gain entry into this residence?" Holly stammered, twisting her hands together. We used a key. Mom gave it to me. It was a spare key for emergencies." "But did you have permission from the homeowner to use that key?" Alex pressed, his tone sharp enough to slice through the tension. "But I cut her off. Exactly. No permission. So technically they broke in. Who knows what might be missing from my house right now?" Nicholas's face darkened, his bravado cracking just a little. "Now hold on a minute." "I see," Alex interrupted smoothly, pacing the hallway like a man in complete control. "So you entered without permission, set up residence, and when the homeowner asked you to leave, you refused. Is that correct?" Nicholas's voice wavered. "We didn't refuse. We just—" "I'm afraid," Alex said, pulling the handcuffs from his belt with a snap that made Holly's eyes widen, "that I'll have to ask you to leave the premises immediately. Failure to do so could result in charges of breaking and entering, trespassing, and even unlawful occupation of a dwelling. Do you really want your children to see you arrested tonight?" And let me tell you, watching the color drained from Nicholas's face in that moment was like watching the universe hand me a long overdue gift. Holly's bravado shattered instantly. "We're sorry," she blurted, clutching at Nicholas's arm. "We'll pack up. We didn't mean... We'll go." "Quickly,"
Alex said firmly, "and return the spare key to the homeowner before you leave." They scrambled. Scrambled. Bags were zipped, shoes were yanked on. The kids looked confused, asking questions, but Holly and Nicholas hushed them frantically, eyes darting to Alex like they were terrified he'd cuff them if they so much as lingered. I stood in the corner, arms crossed, fighting to keep a straight face. Inside, though? Inside, I was soaring. Years of biting my tongue, years of watching my sister dismiss me, belittle my choices, act like she was smarter, freer, happier. All of it melted into pure satisfaction as they bolted out of my house like thieves in the night. Alex and I stood in silence until we heard the slam of their car doors and the roar of the engine as they peeled away. Only then did I let out the laugh I'd been choking back. I collapsed on the couch, clutching my stomach, tears streaming down my face, this time not from anger or pain, but from relief. "You," I gasped, pointing at Alex. "Our lifesaver. I can't believe that actually worked." He grinned, finally relaxing out of character. I have to admit, I wasn't sure if they'd buy it, but man, Nicholas folded fast. Big tough guy. "Yeah," I said, shaking my head. "I'll bark, no bite." Alex followed me into the kitchen, where I brewed us coffee, my hands finally steady for the first time all night. "You did the right thing, Phoebes," he said seriously. "Don't second-guess yourself. They were using you. Family or not, that's not okay." But even as I nodded, a ping of guilt twisted in my stomach. They were my family, my sister, my niece and nephew. Had I gone too far? Would this blow up into something irreparable between us? But then I looked around at my house, my quiet, empty, blessedly peaceful house, my sanctuary restored, and I knew the truth. It was okay to put myself first. It was okay to stand my ground. Still, the question lingers, and I want to put it to you. What would you have done? Would you have let them stay out of guilt, or would you have pulled the same trick I did? Be honest, would you have waited this long for payback? Because I'll tell you this, as sweet as that victory tasted, it was only the beginning. The quiet that filled my house after they drove away that night was almost deafening. You'd think silence would feel empty, lonely even, but for me, it was like balm on an open wound. I sat there in my living room, staring at the half-empty coffee mug on the table, and for the first time in hours, I could breathe. No kids screaming, no Nicholas man-spreading on my couch, no Holly tossing her bags across my floor like it was a hotel lobby. Just peace. But peace has a funny way of making your brain replay everything that just happened. My adrenaline high started to fade, and in its place came something stickier, heavier, guilt. This was my sister. My flesh and blood, the girl I shared a bedroom with as kids, who used to braid my hair, who whispered secrets to me under the covers when we were supposed to be asleep. And now I just humiliated her in front of her husband and kids. Not just told her to leave, tricked her, made her believe she could be arrested, driven her out of my house in a panic. I turned to Alex. "Do you think I went too far?" He leaned back in his chair, sipping his coffee without hesitation. "Not even close. Phoebe, they broke into your house. They were planning to squat here for months without your permission. If you hadn't pulled this stunt, you'd be stuck living like a stranger in your own home. You don't owe them a free ride just because you share DNA." I nodded, but his words didn't quite settle the ache in my chest. Because here's the truth. Standing up for yourself always feels righteous in the moment. But when it's family, the second-guessing creeps in fast. I lay awake in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. Would Holly ever forgive me? Would she spin this story to make me look like the villain, the cold-hearted sister who kicked her family onto the streets? And more importantly, was I okay with that? The days that followed gave me my answer. Because if I thought Holly and Nicholas would leave quietly, I was wrong. The very next morning, I woke up to a barrage of texts from my mother. "Phoebe, what happened last night? Holly said you threw them out like criminals. You could have let them stay for a while. They're family. I raised you better than this. And then finally one that stung more than the others. Do you hate your sister that much? I dropped my phone onto the bed, my hands shaking with a mix of anger and sadness. I didn't hate Holly. God, if anything, I still loved her too much. But did love mean I had to let her trample me? Did it mean I had to erase my own boundaries until I had nothing left? Later that day, Holly called me. I debated answering, my thumb hovering over the screen. When I finally picked up, her voice was cold. I can't believe you did that to us. Do you know how humiliating that was? My kids thought their parents were about to be arrested. My throat tightened. Holly, you moved into my house without asking. You didn't even tell me you were coming back. What did you expect me to do? She scoffed. I expected you to be supportive, to be a sister. We had nowhere else to go. No, I said firmly, and I swear I felt something in me shift, like a line being drawn in stone. You had other options. You could have called me. You could have asked. You chose to invade my space because you assumed I'd just roll over. That's not support, Holly. That's manipulation. There was a pause on the line, heavy and thick. Then she snapped. You'll regret this. Family doesn't turn on family. And she hung up. I sat there staring at the blank screen, my heart
pounding. Maybe some part of me feared she was right. Maybe I would regret it. But then, a week later, karma came knocking. Not at my door this time, but at hers. Through the family grapevine, I learned that after leaving my place in a rush, Holly and Nicholas had checked into a cheap motel. They were burning through what little money they had left, living day to day, no jobs lined up, no home to return to. And Nicholas, Mr. Experiences over paychecks, finally had to face the consequences of his own arrogance. He went crawling back to his old employer, begging for his job, only to be told the position had been filled months ago. Holly tried applying at a few places too, but with a long gap in her resume and 2 kids to juggle, nobody was hiring her on the spot either. The dream life they'd bragged about online, the freedom they'd shoved in my face during every family dinner, it had collapsed like a house of cards. And while part of me wanted to gloat, another part honestly pitied them. Because here's the thing, I didn't want my sister to fail. I didn't want her kids to suffer because of their parents' reckless decisions. What I wanted, what I had always wanted, was for her to respect me, to see that my choices weren't boring or safe or small. They were stable. They were strong. They gave me the life she now envied. And for once, I had the upper hand. Weeks went by, and the storms started to quiet. My mother, still upset, tried to guilt-trip me a few more times, but even she couldn't ignore the reality. Holly had made her bed, and I wasn't going to lie down in it with her. One night, sitting alone on my porch with a glass of wine, I thought back over everything. The betrayal, the anger, the guilt, the sweet, sweet satisfaction of watching Nicholas's face when Alex pulled out those cuffs. And I realized something important. Revenge isn't always about destroying someone. Sometimes it's about reclaiming yourself, about drawing a line and saying, this is my space, my life, my worth, and you don't get to steal it from me. That night, I raised my glass to the quiet street and whispered to myself, I choose me. And maybe that's selfish. Maybe some people will hear this story and think I should have let them stay. Maybe others will say I wasn't harsh enough, that I should have called the real cops, pressed charges, made an example out of them. But I want to ask you, what would you have done if your own sister barged into your house with her whole family, acting like they were entitled to your hard-earned sanctuary? Would you have let them stay? Or would you have pulled the trigger on a plan that forced them out? Be honest.
Because when it's family, the line between compassion and being used is razor thin. And as for me, I don't regret it. Not one bit. Because I walked back into my house that night after they left, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. And that, my friends, is worth everything. You'd think after being chased out of my house by a fake cop, Holly and Nicholas would have learned their lesson, licked their wounds quietly, and figured out how to land on their feet. But no, the drama was far from over. A week after the eviction, I got a phone call from my cousin Jenna. She didn't even say hello before blurting, "What did you do to Holly? She says you called the cops on her and traumatized the kids." I swear I nearly dropped the phone. What? Jenna, I didn't call the cops, and I didn't traumatize anyone. They broke into my house with a spare key Mom gave them behind my back. They were moving in without asking me. There was a pause on the other end. Then Jenna sighed. "Phoebe, look, I get it. Holly's been telling everyone you turned into some heartless landlord like you value your space more than your family. People are talking." I pinched the bridge of my nose, feeling my blood pressure spike. So let me get this straight. She invades my house, refuses to leave, and somehow I'm the villain? And Jenna, bless her honesty, said, "That's how Holly's framing it, yeah?" I thanked her for telling me and hung up, my hands trembling. It was one thing for Holly to be mad at me, but to smear my name across the family like I was some ice queen who kicked her poor kids into the cold? That stung deeper than I'd expected. Because here's the thing. I've always been the responsible one, the steady, boring, dependable little sister. If someone needed a loan, if someone needed help moving, if someone needed a babysitter, it was me. And for years, I carried that role proudly, even when nobody seemed to notice the sacrifices it took. But now, when I finally drew a line in the sand, suddenly I was the selfish one? The hypocrisy made me want to scream. But I didn't scream. I waited. Because I knew that Holly and Nicholas's situation wasn't sustainable. They were drifting from one cheap motel to another, posting carefully curated photos online to make it look like some fun adventure, but behind the scenes, they were crumbling. And sure enough, the cracks widened. 2 weeks later, I got another call, this time from Mom. Her voice was tight, weary. "Phoebe, I need to ask you something. Holly and the kids are staying here now, and it's chaos. Nicholas is always on the phone, arguing about money. The kids are restless. And Holly keeps saying if you had just let them stay at your place, none of this would be happening. Is that true?" I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. "No, Mom. What's happening is because Holly and Nicholas sold their house on a whim, spent the money, and had no backup plan. This isn't about me. It's about their choices." Mom sighed. "I know you're right. I do. But it's hard. They keep painting you as the bad guy, and it's tearing me apart to see my daughters fighting like this." That guilt again. It slithered back into my chest, coiling tight. For a split second, I almost caved. Almost said, "Fine, send them back here." But then I remembered Nicholas looming over me, Holly chirping about moving in for a few months, the way they didn't even ask. My sanctuary stolen, my heart pounding in my locked bedroom. No, enough, enough. "Mom," I said, voice steady, "I love Holly. I love the kids. But love doesn't mean letting someone walk all over me. If she wants help, I'll support her in finding a job, in budgeting, in rebuilding, but I will not let them live in my house again. Ever." The silence on the line was deafening. Then to my shock, Mom whispered, "Maybe you're right. Maybe this will be the lesson they need." That was the first crack in the armor, but Holly wasn't ready to give up. A few days later, she showed up at my house. Unannounced, of course. I opened the door to find her standing there, arms crossed, eyes blazing. You think you won, don't you? Kicking us out, making me look like a fool in front of my kids. But guess what, Phoebe? They'll never forget what you did. You scared them half to death. And Mom, she's disgusted with you. I leaned against the doorframe, keeping my voice calm even though my hands shook. If you want to blame me for your problems, Holly, go ahead. But deep down, you know this isn't about me. This is about you and Nicholas making reckless choices and expecting everyone else to clean up the mess. Her face twisted, but for once, she had no comeback. She stormed off, muttering curses under her breath, and I stood there, watching her go, my heart pounding with a mix of sorrow and steel. Because that was the moment I realized something important. I wasn't the villain in this story. I was the boundary. I was the stop sign. I was the one who finally said no when everyone else kept enabling her. And you know what? It hurt. It hurt like hell to see my sister's face contorted with anger, to hear her words dripping with venom. But sometimes love looks like letting someone fall so they learn how to stand up again. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, the drama began to die down. Holly and Nicholas scraped together jobs. Nothing glamorous, just enough to get by. They rented a small apartment across town. Not the dream life they'd bragged about, but a dose of reality they desperately needed. Our relationship? Strained, awkward, distant. We spoke at family gatherings, polite but brittle, both of us aware of the wall between us. Maybe one day it'll soften. Maybe not. But I know one thing for sure. She'll never try to move into my house again. And me? I walk through my front door every night with a new kind of pride. This is my home, not just because I bought it, not just because I worked for it, but because I defended it, because I proved to myself that I could stand tall even when it meant standing alone. And maybe that's the real revenge. Not the fake cop, not the panic scramble out the door, not the karma that came crashing down on their perfect little fantasy. No, the real revenge was me reclaiming my power,